Hello everyone, welcome to the GeoEcologist. I am Dr. Krishnanand and you have been watching my various videos related to geography, environment and several other topics on my channel, The GeoEcologist. So if you are new to this channel, consider subscribing our channel and do go to the playlist section to check the previous videos available on our channel. Now in today's session on regional geography, we are going to learn about a very interesting concept of denoted region, also known as planning region. Now what is planning region? What are its various types, its attributes, and most importantly, we'll be discussing the various methods and techniques of delineation of these planning regions in today's session. But before we go ahead, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and to share the videos with others as well. So now let's go ahead and learn about the concept of planning region, and also we'll be talking about the various methods of delineation of planning region. So watch the video till the end to understand all the concept and methods. Now the first thing to learn here is a planning region is a segment of territory, or you can say space, which is primarily economic in nature because of decisions made for economic development. And we also learn about it in a way when term planning basically means taking decision or making decision to implement them in order to attain sustainable regional and economic development. Now this sustainable regional and economic development is the core aspect of this concept of planning region. So a sustainable region is what? It's a region which has all these components like settlements, water resources, power supply, social infrastructure, environmental quality, public transport, economic activity. So you see, this is an interdisciplinary concept where decision makings are the prime things, right? So what you observe here, that planning regions may be delineated as administrative regions, political regions, or state, district, or block, only because of one reason, that is the decision making factor. And remember, these are better in management and collecting statistical data if we delineate them in a proper manner. So that's very much important. Now what we observe is the concept of scale perspective, as it always comes in geography. So in scale, what do we learn in planning region? It is basically, if you look into country level, it is a planning region for whole country, for national plans. What about at state level? It is for state plans. And what about the next ones? District, tehsil blocks at micro regional plans. So basically it means what? Whatever our plans for development are, at what scale are we trying to implement? That is the region we are talking about. So that's why planning region is a purpose-driven region. That's important to understand. Then further, look into the definitions given by some scholars. For example, Woodville. Now remember, Woodville is a planner and a scholar, and also we have learned about Woodville in the models and theories in human geography. So he talks about planning region as an area displaying some coherence or unit of economic decisions. So again comes the word economic decisions, right? Then what we observe is definition of the great scholar Klassen, and what he says, a planning region must be large enough, remember large enough, to take investment decisions of an economic size, and also it should have enough labor and industry of its own to maintain it, to grow, and also should have homogeneous economic structure alongside the growth point. Now remember, this growth point is a point from where growth triggers along. That's where regional development percolates, right? So this is according to Klassen. Now what you observe is the third definition by Kibble, and where planning region is an area large enough to enable substantial changes in distribution of population and employment, and remember, to take place within given boundaries. So delineation becomes really important, and which is small enough for its planning problems to viewed as a whole. So large enough for the planning decisions, but small enough to be looked as a unit as a whole. So that is what is the planning region actually according to these scholars. Now what you observe further, that in short, planning region should be defined according to the purpose of one's analysis. So it all depends upon what is the purpose of our analysis. Accordingly we can define our planning region, where the purpose has to attain the end, the means to the end. That kind of thought process is there behind planning region. Now if you observe, what are the various characteristics of planning region? So let's look at the list. Remember, people should have social and cultural cohesiveness in a region. Then separate unit for data collection and analysis. It should be, right? It should be clear-cut defined so that we have enough data at that unit. Right? Then it should have an economic existence. Then further, if you observe, it should be small enough to ensure local people's participation, and also it should have one administrative agency, very important for implementation of our plans, and also its geographical size should be big enough to exploit the resources in judicious manner. And what is the next point? Look here. Fairly homogeneous economic structure, one or more growth points, and the most important, remember, common appreciation of local problems, common aspirations, approaches to their solution. So this is something which makes it cohesive, unique, and that's how we can say that this region can be delineated on its characteristics, right? So now, what is further in this is again the scale concept if you observe, and also at macro, meso, micro levels. So if you observe the hierarchy concept here, for example, first order macro functional regions, which correspond to cases of India in terms of states. Then if you observe second order meso-functional regions, which are metropolitan or river valley regions. Then third order is micro-functional region, which correspond to administrative areas of the state. And the fourth one is locality of the area planning, that is micro area. So what you observe? While considering these regions for planning, we have different set of regions forming a hierarchy. If you observe what's happening, specific area planning, district planning, division planning, state planning, national planning. This is how we are going in hierarchy of planning region. Right? So that's what we need to understand, that this hierarchy is interconnected, it's interrelated, right? Then what we need to look into is further the types of planning region. And it has two major types if you observe carefully. Planning region is also called denoted region, planning region, or pedagogical region. And it has two types, major types. One is called uniform region and one is nodal region. Now remember, uniformity is the word here again. Homogeneity, uniformity. So it calls for formality, that is formal region, which is formally delineated according to some homogeneous criteria or uniform criteria which exists. But what about nodal region? Nodal region is about heterogeneity principle. It's about the functions of the area. So it's called functional region, where one node is important, from where many things generate out and many things come inside. So what you see? Movement of people, idea, things, and interconnected networks of node. This kind of region based on function is called nodal region or functional region. So first of all, let's look into formal regions. So these regions have a fixed criteria. For example, the criteria could be physical criteria like topography, climate, vegetation, or economic criteria like you can see industrial criteria, or if you can see agriculture like income, rate of employment, rate of economic growth, or cultural criteria which is language, or you can say any other attribute. So these kind of criteria are formal criteria. Right? But remember, they are largely fixed and static in nature. So for example, you can see natural regions like savanna region, rainforest region, linguistic region, bioclimatic region, and several other regions. These kind of regions are formally instituted. You can actually delineate them on formal databases, isn't it? But what about functional region? It's a combination, it's a networking that matters in a functional region. So you observe this Delhi NCR here, and what is here? Sonipat Kundli zone, Ghaziabad Loni zone, you have Faridabad zone, you have Gurgaon Manesar zone, you have Badargarh zone, connected with Delhi node. This is this nodal point from where you observe these connections. So this region is what you see is basis of economic function, services, goods and services that proliferate from Delhi to outskirts and from outskirts to Delhi. This kind of region is functional region, isn't it? It displays a certain functional coherence, and it is made of a systems approach, which is many parts making a whole system. So it is composed of heterogeneous units such as towns, cities, villages coming together in this system. And here flows are very important, flows of goods and services, right? So you can observe this kind of example. And very important, the criteria taken for identification of functional region is, remember, objective objective and identifiable. For example, industrial region, metropolitan region, tourism region, administrative region, political region. These kind of region, if you observe, is purpose driven, function driven, isn't it? So what we observe now is delineation of these planning regions. How formal regions are delineated and how functional regions are delineated. And delineation simply means that how do you make the area under a given boundary. So how do we construct a boundary to define this is one region and it is different from outside? Right? So delineation is very important, and delineation of formal regions is the first thing that we learn, and it is based on obviously homogeneity principle. So observe, many times these kind of homogeneity principles are used. For example, geography, so soil, rainfall, climatic factors; economic, so per capita income, number of industry factor; then you have social cultural like language, political affiliation. So all these number of formal criterias are instituted to delineate a formal region. So what do we do here? We try to delineate regions by taking into account more than one feature. Now when we say more than one feature, it means it could be geographical and economic feature together. So in this you have togetherness of multiple features. So for this case, we have a weighted index method as the first method, under which we have three components. Right? So it is called fixed index method, variable index method, and a cluster method. Now remember, these are three statistical methods used to delineate a formal region. So first one is fixed index method. Now the word is index. It means we're assigning matrices, numbers basically, to these regions on the basis of their chosen criteria or characteristics. For example, per capita income, unemployment, rate of industrialization. So what we do, we assign these characteristics some weightage here, which is fixed in nature, and then we group them together in the form of indices. So what we observe, if you plot this area and divide it into several units on the basis of these characteristics, then what we do, we group them, the places of same characteristics, in one particular group. So now after this is available, fixed index is available, what do? We can simply say that this is one region which has one characteristic. Right? Similarly, this is one region here which is different. Now this is another region here which is different. Right? So this is how small units and regions can be delineated on the basis of fixed index criteria. But what about variable indexes? There we have variable index method. And remember, here we assign different weights to different areas or regions, right? So weight given to each activity in each region is different here. So heterogeneity is important. And when is this method used? It is used when, remember, criteria can be compared with each other. That's when we use it. And then further we have a clustering method, very famous method, especially for integrated rural development programs, where you have clusters of villages. Where comparability is not possible, in such cases we do clustering. So how does it look like? Remember, we take these settlement patterns and on some principle we do this clustering, and final clusters look like this. So this is one cluster region, this is another cluster region, this is another cluster region. This is the method that we generally apply for formally instituted regions. So this is the first method where weightage is assigned. But what about factor analysis? This is also used as a statistical tool for the many regions delineation, when you have variables which is more than 20, or you can say many variables are there. So if many variables are there, many characteristics are there, then we apply factor analysis method, and basically it talks about factorization and doing the principal component analysis or generating several other models to analyze that which factors are dominating criteria of given region. Right? So in that, many factor approaches are there. For example, exploratory factor analysis, common factor analysis, principal component analysis, and several others that we can see as statistical tool. But why do we use this factor analysis? Because number of factors are too many here. Right? And then we can group these factors and understand that which are the most dominating factors which give characteristics, uniqueness to that particular region. That's where factor analysis is used. So we isolate these factors and group areas on the basis of factor loadings. How many factors factors we can club into one. That's where the principal factors come together, right? And in this approach, it's very important to remember Adam Smith, who used this method for industrial change, industrial structure, and defined and delineated the economic health regions as well. Then come to delineation of functional region finally. So how a functional region will be delineated? Now remember here what happens, the functionality is important. Here services, flows of goods and services are important. So here flow analysis and gravitational analysis are used to actually delineate the region along a nodal point. What is the coverage of the area of the services that this nodal point is providing? So then here we have flow analysis, and flow analysis is based on empirical study where we look into intra-regional commodity flows, community patterns, migration flows, trade in the area. All these things are looked into to delineate these functions, right? Very important. So each flow would show a decreasing intensity as it is distant from the main center. So if you're going away from the main center, what happens? The flow is showing decreasing intensity. It's more in the core, and away as you go towards the periphery of the region, what happens? It is now decreasing in intensity. So you can see the flow analysis here. This is the core, the node, and as you go away from the node, the characteristics are found to decrease in their nature. Right? So flow can be identified of multiple kinds. For example, economic flows, objective and purpose, social flows, students and hospital patients, political like flow of government expenditure, information flows like telegrams, newspaper, telephone calls. So all these things generating, radiating away from the center or coming towards the center from a given distance. That will give us the pattern or that delineation of that functional region, right? Then what we have is the gravitational flow analysis, and gravity analysis is taken from physics. The concept is again gm by r square. So what you see here, this formula is applied for gravity flow between two centers. When you have two nodes or two centers or multiple centers, then we can use gravity analysis where you observe this G factor is calculated, which is basically gravity force between centers A and B, and M is basically mass of centers A and B, which can be population, which can be income. So all those characteristics can be put as masses, and then D is basically the distance between them, and K is constant. Right. So this kind of analysis is also used to actually delineate the functional region. Now let's look into the people who attempted regionalization on certain criteria. So first of its kind, we look into Dudley Stamp in 1922, who attempted the regionalization in India, and 3 major natural regions, 22 sub-regions he divided. Then what we observe is J.N.L. Baker. He attempted the same in 1928, right? And then further we have Spade's classification in 1957 and 67. And here 3 macro regions like Mountain Rim, Indo-Gangetic Plain, Peninsular region, 34 regions of first order, 74 of second order, 225 subdivisions. These were demarcated. Then what we observe is the great S.P. Chatterjee's classification, which is most widely used classification. Remember the Indian formal classification of region? Great Mountain Wall, Great Plains, Great Plateaus, Great Coastal Plains and Islands. This formal regions, observe this is all natural regions of S.P. Chatterjee. Apart from this, we find many scholars giving economic regionalization of India. So remember the names, V. Nath, Resource and Development Regions and Divisions of India. In 50 regions he divided. Then you have Bhatt and Rao. So L.S. Bhatt and V.L.S. Prakasha Rao, Regional Planning for India. Sengupta and Galina Dasyuk. Then what you observe is K.L. Vij. Then you have Hasim, then you have Bhatt, then you have Chandrasekhar, Sengupta. All these scholars and their titles you can see here attempted many economic regionalization of India as well. Now what you observe is the problems. That what are the problems in delineation? Remember, lack of correlation between regions defined according to different criteria is the problem, because when there is no coherence in definitions, it means it can be different for different cases. So then it is a problem to actually make it a coherent point. Then what you have is dynamic nature of regional activities. It means it's changing, ever changing. So to meet that criteria, you have to also make a dynamic basis for regionalization. And then it's unlikely that regional boundaries of delineation defined according to functional and formal would ever match. So remember, formal region and functional region, it's very rare that it could match together. Then gravity model is not easy to compute or calculate, and other factor analysis is also not easy method for a commoner to do it, right? So that's where it is difficult. And concept of distance is also something which is static in gravity analysis. Now what you observe is there are many more methods of delineation of these formal regions, functional regions. So some of them are qualitative methods, some are quantitative methods. For example, the intensity analysis index method, flow analysis, skyline method, R.L. Singh's method that he used for the land development. We have talked about it in previous lectures in settlement geography. Now migration flow by Stouffer, then breakpoint theory by Converse, Rayleigh's gravitation model of trade, then proximal method, Huff's probabilistic method. These are several methods used for delineation of these regions at different points of time by different scholars, which is important. So now, when we have discussed about the various concepts and types related to planning region, its methods of delineation, and also limitations, in the sessions to come, we'll be talking more on different other aspects of regional geography. So stay tuned, stay safe, keep watching and learning, keep subscribed to the channel, and don't forget to share the videos with others as well.